Get your hands behind your back. The officer's voice cuts through the air like a knife. A black woman stands in a department store parking lot, trembling, confused, trying to explain. Her voice shakes. Please, there's been a mistake. I can show you my ID. I said hands behind your back. Now, she complies. Of course she complies. She knows what happens when you don't comply. Her hands move slowly behind her back, and that's when you hear it. The metallic click that sounds like a death sentence. Handcuffs. Tight. Too tight. The metal cuts into her wrists. Ow, that's too tight, please. Stop resisting. She's not resisting. She's standing still, tears streaming down her face, but the officer repeats it louder for the growing crowd. Stop resisting. A knee presses into her back. Not hard enough to knock her down, but hard enough to remind her who has the power here. Hard enough to humiliate her. Hard enough to make every person watching pull out their phone because they've seen this before. They know how this ends. She's pushed toward the patrol car, stumbling in her sneakers. Please, just check my wallet. My name is Maya Richardson. Save it. They all say that. The officer's hand clamps on the back of her head, too rough, too aggressive, and shoves her down into the back seat. Her shoulder hits the frame of the car. She winces. Nobody cares. The door slams shut. Through the window you can see her face. Tears. Terror, rage, disbelief, the look of a woman who's done everything right and is still being treated like a criminal. The look of a woman who knows that at any moment this could turn deadly. The crowd is bigger now. Phones everywhere. Someone shouts, "She didn't do anything? I was in there. She didn't steal nothing." The officers ignore them. The store manager stands at the entrance with his arms crossed, satisfied. Justice served. Another shoplifter caught. Another day of protecting corporate property from people who don't belong. But here's what they don't know. Here's what makes this moment so devastating, so enraging, so absolutely unforgivable. That woman sitting in the back of that patrol car, handcuffed like an animal, treated like trash, stripped of her dignity in front of strangers with cameras? She's Captain Maya Richardson. Oakland Police Department, badge number 4127. 20 years on the force. She outranks every officer in that parking lot. She's testified before Congress on police reform. She's trained hundreds of officers on de-escalation and implicit bias. She's dedicated her entire life to the badge those officers are wearing, and they just handcuffed her for shopping while black. In exactly 8 minutes, they're going to open her wallet. They're going to see that police ID, and they're going to realize they just made a mistake that will haunt them for the rest of their careers. But by then, it'll be too late. The video will be everywhere. The damage will be done. And the question that will keep you up at night, the question that should terrify every single person watching this, is simple. If this can happen to a police captain, what happens to everyone else? If a woman with a badge, with 20 years of service, with connections and authority and power, if she can be thrown to the ground and handcuffed and humiliated for the crime of existing in a store while black, then what chance does anyone else have? What happens to the single mother who can't afford a lawyer? What happens to the teenager who doesn't know his rights? What happens to the elderly woman who's too scared to speak up? What happens to the countless people who experience this every single day and don't have a badge to save them? This isn't just a story about one woman's nightmare afternoon. This is a story about a system so broken, so poisoned by bias, so quick to assume guilt based on skin color, that even their own people aren't safe from it. They handcuffed a captain. They traumatized a decorated officer. They proved that no amount of success, no amount of achievement, no amount of service to your community can protect you if you're black in America, and you're about to see exactly how it happened. But first, we need to go back 6 hours. Back to when Maya Richardson woke up in her modest Oakland apartment, thinking today was just going to be her day off. Back to when she had no idea that a simple trip to buy a blazer would turn into the most humiliating experience of her life. Back to the moment when everything changed. 6 hours earlier, the sun was barely breaking over Oakland when Maya Richardson's alarm went off at 6 in the morning. At 42 years old, Maya moved through her modest apartment with the disciplined grace of someone who had spent 2 decades in uniform. Her athletic build and natural hair pulled into a neat bun reflected a woman who had nothing to prove, yet spent every day proving herself anyway. The walls of her small living room told a story most people never got to see. Her police academy graduation photo hung next to commendations for bravery, community service awards, and pictures of her with youth groups from the neighborhood. These weren't just decorations. They were evidence of a life spent fighting for something bigger than herself. Maya's morning routine was sacred. She checked her duty weapon, locked securely away in its safe. She poured herself a cup of coffee, black, no sugar. And then she did what she did every morning. She looked at the framed photograph on her kitchen counter. Her younger brother, Marcus Jr., in a prison uniform. He was 19 when he was wrongfully convicted. 19 years old, and the system swallowed him whole. That photo was why Maya became a cop. Not to be part of the system, but to change it from within. She grew up in this very neighborhood, in the projects 3 blocks away. She knew what it felt like to be afraid of the people who were supposed to protect you. She knew what it felt like to be invisible, to be assumed guilty, to have to fight twice as hard for half the recognition. 20 years on the force. 20 years of proving she belonged. 20 years of being the only black woman in rooms full of men who questioned her every decision. And 6 months ago, she finally made captain. Captain Maya Richardson. It sounded good, but it came with a price. The higher she climbed, the more isolated she felt. The more she was expected to smile and play politics instead of doing the work that mattered. But today was her day off. Rare and precious, like finding a diamond in a parking lot. She didn't have to be Captain Richardson today. She could just be Maya. She decided to treat herself. There was a police reform panel coming up in 2 weeks, and she wanted to look the part. Not for vanity, but because she knew how the game worked. If she showed up looking anything less than polished and professional, they'd find a reason to dismiss her voice. So she needed a new blazer. Something sharp. Something that said she belonged at that table. Maya pulled on jeans, sneakers, and her old university hoodie, the one that was more comfortable than it had any right to be. No makeup, no badge, no gun, just Maya. She grabbed her wallet from the counter, and for a split second, she considered taking her police ID badge. But no, it was her day off. She wasn't Captain Richardson today. She was just a woman going shopping. Her phone buzzed. Her best friend Keisha, always up early, always checking in. The two of them talked as Maya drove downtown. Keisha wanted to know how Maya was holding up with all the pressure at work. The truth? Maya was exhausted. Being one of the few black women in police leadership meant every decision was scrutinized, every mistake was magnified, every success was attributed to luck or affirmative action. She couldn't just be good. She had to be perfect, and even perfect wasn't always enough. But Maya didn't say all that. She just laughed it off, told Keisha she was fine, and mentioned she was going to Prestige department store to buy a blazer for the panel. Keisha warned her, "You know how those fancy stores are, girl. They're going to follow you around like you're there to rob the place." Maya brushed it off. She'd dealt with it her whole life. She wasn't going to let it stop her from spending her own money in her own city. When Maya pulled into the parking lot of Prestige department store, she felt it immediately, that subtle shift in atmosphere. The building was all glass and marble, gleaming in the late morning sun. The parking lot was full of luxury cars. This wasn't her world, but her money was just as green as anyone else's. She pushed through the revolving doors and stepped into the cool, perfumed air of the store. Everything was sleek, minimalist, expensive. The kind of place where even the mannequins looked like they were judging you. The clientele was mostly white, well-dressed, moving through the aisles with the confidence of people who knew they belonged. And then there was Maya. Jeans, sneakers, hoodie. Instantly, she felt the eyes on her. Near the entrance, a security guard stood with his arms crossed. Marcus, late 50s, a black man with tired eyes and a uniform that had seen better days. He caught Maya's eye and gave her a small nod. Not a greeting, more like recognition. A silent acknowledgement between two people who knew what it felt like to be watched, to be suspected, to be othered in spaces like this. Maya nodded back and moved deeper into the store, heading for the women's professional section. That's when she noticed her. Jennifer, a sales associate in her mid-30s, blonde, perfectly made up, with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Jennifer had been helping an elderly white woman, Mrs. Patterson, chatting warmly about grandchildren and vacation homes. But the moment Maya entered her section, Jennifer's demeanor changed. She didn't approach Maya. She didn't offer help. She just watched, followed at a distance, pretending to reorganize displays that didn't need organizing. Maya noticed, of course. How could she not? But she dealt with this her entire life, in stores, in restaurants, in her own police station. The assumption that she didn't belong, the suspicion that she was up to no good. She'd learned to swallow the anger, to keep her face neutral, to move through the world like she was walking on eggshells. So she browsed. She touched the fabrics, checked the price tags, held blazers up to the light. She found a navy blue one that felt right, structured but not stiff, professional but not boring. $450. A splurge, but she'd earned it. She draped it over her arm and kept looking, picking up a silk scarf and a pair of leather gloves. Behind her, Jennifer whispered something into her headset. Maya's mind was elsewhere, though. She was thinking about the panel, about the speech she'd have to give, about how she'd have to smile and be gracious while talking about a system that had failed her brother, that failed people who looked like her every single day. She was thinking about how exhausting it was to always have to prove she deserved to be in the room. She was thinking about how, even now, standing in a department store with money in her pocket, she still had to prove she wasn't a criminal. Have you ever walked into a store and immediately felt like you didn't belong? That prickling sensation on the back of your neck, the weight of eyes following your every move, the silent message that you're not welcome here? That's what Maya felt, and she'd felt it 1,000 times before. But here's the thing about Maya Richardson. She didn't let it stop her. She refused to be invisible. She refused to shrink herself to make others comfortable. So she kept browsing, kept shopping, kept existing in a space that didn't want her there. And if you're already hooked on this story, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button right now and tell me in the comment below from which part of the world are you watching and what time it is. Because what happens next is going to blow your mind, and you're not going to want to miss a single moment. Maya headed toward the fitting rooms, blazer in hand, completely unaware that in the next few minutes, her entire day, her entire life, was about to be turned upside down. What Maya didn't know was that the moment she picked up that navy blazer, she had already been marked as a suspect. What she didn't know was that while she was thinking about the police reform panel and her speech about justice, someone was whispering into a headset, setting in motion a chain of events that would shatter her entire day. Jennifer, the blonde sales associate, wasn't just watching Maya anymore. She was following her. Every step Maya took, Jennifer was 3 steps behind, pretending to reorganize sweaters that didn't need organizing, straightening hangers that were already straight. It was a performance, and Maya was the unwitting star. Maya held the navy blazer up to the light, examining the stitching, the cut, the way the fabric caught the sun streaming through the store's massive windows. $450. It was expensive, but it was perfect. She draped it over her arm and continued browsing. A silk scarf caught her eye, elegant, understated, deep burgundy. $120. She added it to her arm. Then a pair of leather gloves, soft as butter, $85. She held them up, considered them, added them to the growing collection. Behind her, Jennifer's voice was barely a whisper, but the words carried weight. Code 5 in women's wear, fitting room area. Within 90 seconds, a man appeared. Derek Clemens, the store manager. 45 years old, corporate down to his polished shoes and his perfectly knotted tie. 15 years with prestige department store, and he knew the playbook by heart. He positioned himself at the edge of the women's section, arms crossed, eyes locked on Maya. He didn't approach. He just watched. And Maya felt it, that shift in the air, the way the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. She'd been a cop long enough to know when she was being surveilled. She'd been black her entire life, so she knew what this particular kind of surveillance meant. But she refused to be intimidated. She refused to put the clothes down and leave. She refused to give them the satisfaction. So she kept browsing, kept shopping, kept taking up space in a store that clearly didn't want her there. She headed toward the fitting rooms. The fitting room attendant was a young woman named Sophia. 19 years old, college student, working part-time to pay for textbooks and rent. Sophia had kind eyes and tired hands, and when Maya approached, she smiled warmly. "How many pieces, ma'am?" Maya handed over the items. "3, please." Sophia counted them out, tagging each one. 3 pieces. "Go ahead, ma'am. Let me know if you need anything." Maya stepped into the small fitting room, pulling the curtain closed behind her. The space was cramped, lit by harsh fluorescent lights that made everything look slightly jaundiced. She hung the blazer on the hook, kicked off her sneakers, and slipped it on over her hoodie. She looked at herself in the mirror, and for a moment, everything else fell away. She wasn't Captain Maya Richardson, police officer, community leader, spokesperson for reform. She was just Maya. The little girl from the projects who used to walk past stores like this and wonder what it would be like to afford anything inside. The girl who wore hand-me-downs and shoes with holes in the soles. The girl who was told again and again that she didn't belong in certain spaces. She saw that little girl in the mirror, wearing a $450 blazer, and she felt something crack open in her chest. Pride, maybe? Or grief for all the years she'd spent fighting to be seen as human. The blazer fit perfectly. She decided to keep it. The gloves, though, she tried them on, but they felt too tight. She didn't need them anyway. She hung them back on the hanger and kept the scarf and the blazer. When Maya stepped out of the fitting room, Sophia was there with her smile. "How'd everything work?" Maya handed back 2 items. "I'm keeping 2 pieces. The gloves didn't fit." Sophia counted, nodded. "Perfect. Have a great day, ma'am." Maya took the blazer and scarf and headed back out onto the sales floor. She wasn't ready to check out yet. She wanted to browse a little more. Maybe look at shoes, maybe check out the cosmetics section. It was her day off, after all. She was allowed to take her time. But Derek and Jennifer had other plans. They had positioned themselves near the exit, standing like sentries, whispering to each other, glancing at Maya every few seconds. Maya browsed the shoe section, running her fingers over patent leather heels and suede boots. She looked at lipsticks, testing colors on the back of her hand. 10 minutes passed. Maybe 15. The entire time, she could feel their eyes on her. Derek and Jennifer, watching her every move. And Marcus, the security guard, standing by the entrance, looking more and more uncomfortable. Finally, Maya decided she was done. She had what she came for. She headed to the register, ready to pay and get out of this suffocating place. The cashier was a young man named Tim, 22, nervous energy, the kind of guy who probably called his mom every Sunday. He smiled when Maya approached, scanning the area like he was expecting someone to jump out at him. Maya placed the blazer and scarf on the counter. "Just these 2, please." She reached for her wallet, and then Derek was there. "Excuse me, ma'am, I need you to come with me." Maya looked up, confused. "I'm sorry, what?" Derek's voice was louder now, more authoritative. "You need to come to the security office. Now." Maya's heart rate ticked up, but she kept her voice steady. "I'm purchasing these items. Is there a problem?" That's when Jennifer stepped forward, her voice dripping with false concern. "Ma'am, we have you on camera taking items into the fitting room that you didn't bring out." Maya's heart dropped into her stomach. "That's impossible. Check your footage. I returned the gloves. The fitting room attendant can confirm it." But Derek wasn't listening. His voice was getting louder, and people were starting to notice. A small crowd was beginning to gather. Other shoppers, slowing down, pulling out phones, watching the scene unfold. "Ma'am, we can do this the easy way or the hard way." The easy way or the hard way? Maya had heard those words before. She'd said those words before, as a cop, and now they were being said to her. She felt the familiar rage bubbling up in her chest, the helplessness that came with being accused of something she didn't do. But she swallowed it down. She forced herself to stay calm. "I'm happy to cooperate, but I haven't stolen anything." In moments like this, every move feels like a trap. Stay calm and you're suspicious. Defend yourself and you're aggressive. What would you do if you were in Maya's position? Let me know in the comments. Derek grabbed Maya's arm, not gently, and started walking her toward the back of the store. Maya didn't resist. She couldn't. She knew what happened to black women who resisted, who raised their voices, who fought back. So she walked, head held high, even as every eye in that store turned to watch her being escorted like a criminal. The security office was small and windowless, claustrophobic, lit by the glow of multiple monitors showing different angles of the store. Marcus was already there, standing in the corner, his face tight with discomfort. He wouldn't meet Maya's eyes. Derek pointed to the desk. "Empty your bag." Maya complied. She pulled out her wallet, her phone, her keys, receipts from earlier errands, a coffee shop, a gas station, lip balm, tissues. The mundane contents of a woman's purse, laid bare for inspection. Nothing stolen. Derek wasn't satisfied. "What about your pockets?" Maya's voice was tight, controlled, but the anger was seeping through. "You're racially profiling me." Jennifer, standing in the doorway, scoffed. "This has nothing to do with race. We have policies. We have procedures." Policies. Procedures. The same words used to justify every injustice, every humiliation, every assumption of guilt. Derek moved to one of the monitors, rewinding the footage. "Here. Look. You enter the fitting room with 3 items. You exit with 2 visible." Maya stepped closer, looking at the grainy footage. "I put the gloves back on the rack in the clearance section. Check your cameras there." Derek shook his head. "Our cameras don't cover that angle." "Convenient." Convenient. The word hung in the air like an accusation. Maya's frustration was building now, a pressure behind her ribs that made it hard to breathe. "Then check the floor. Ask your fitting room attendant. She counted the items when I left." Derek's expression didn't change. "We've already found the gloves, back on the shelf, just like you said. But we have reason to believe you may have concealed other items." "Other items? What other items?" Maya was wearing jeans and a hoodie. Where exactly did they think she was hiding merchandise? "This is insane. I'm purchasing these items. Scan them. Take my money. I'm not a thief." Derek pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the police." And there it was. The moment Maya had been dreading. The moment when this humiliating misunderstanding turned into something far more dangerous. "Fine. Call them." The words came out steadier than she felt. Because Maya knew, she knew, what happened when police were called on black people for misunderstandings. She knew how quickly situations escalated. She knew how many people had died over nothing, over selling loose cigarettes, over a counterfeit $20 bill, over sleeping in their own beds. And she knew, with a cold certainty that settled in her bones, that her badge wouldn't protect her if it was locked in a safe at home. Marcus, the security guard, stood in the corner watching. His jaw was clenched, his hands balled into fists at his sides. He saw himself in Maya. He saw his daughter, his wife, his mother. He saw every black person who had ever been accused, suspected, assumed guilty until proven innocent. But he didn't say anything. He couldn't. He needed this job. He had bills to pay, mouths to feed, so he stood there, silent, complicit, hating himself with every passing second. If you want to see how this unbelievable situation unfolds, make sure you're subscribed. Hit that button right now, because what happens next will leave you speechless. Derek was on the phone now, speaking in low, urgent tones. Maya stood in the middle of that windowless room, surrounded by people who had already decided she was guilty. Her heart was pounding. Her hands were shaking, but her face was a mask of calm. Because she'd learned, a long time ago, that showing fear was dangerous. Showing anger was dangerous. Showing anything other than perfect compliance was dangerous. So she stood there and waited for the police to arrive. Waited for her world to collapse. And she had no idea that in a few short minutes, when those officers walked through the door, everything she thought she knew about justice, about fairness, about the system she'd spent 20 years trying to fix, was about to be shattered beyond repair. 7 minutes. That's how long it took for 2 police officers to arrive and turn Maya's humiliating afternoon into a nightmare she would never forget. 7 minutes for her entire world to come crashing down. Officer Ryan Mitchell walked through those glass doors first. 32 years old, 8 years on the force, with the kind of swagger that came from too many years of unchecked authority. Behind him was Officer Lisa Tran, 28, 4 years on the job. Still young enough to question things, but old enough to know when to keep her mouth shut. Ryan spotted Derek immediately and walked over with a familiarity that turned Maya's stomach. They knew each other. Of course they did. Derek had probably called in dozens of these shoplifting incidents, and Ryan had probably responded to most of them. Derek launched into his explanation, his voice dripping with exaggerated concern. He painted Maya as a suspicious character from the moment she walked in. He talked about the missing gloves, the fitting room, the refusal to cooperate. He made it sound like Maya was a career criminal caught in the act, instead of a woman trying to buy a blazer on her day off. Ryan listened, nodding, his hand drifting toward his belt, toward his weapon, in a gesture so casual it was almost unconscious. Then he turned to Maya. "Ma'am, we need you to stand up." Maya stood slowly, her mind racing, calculating every word before it left her mouth. She'd been trained for this. She'd trained others for this. Stay calm. Be respectful. Don't make sudden movements. Follow commands. Survive. "Officers, there's been a misunderstanding. I haven't stolen anything. I'd like to show you my ID." Ryan's response was immediate, sharp. "Keep your hands where I can see them." Lisa stood back, observing. Her eyes moved from Maya to Derek, to Ryan, and something flickered across her face. Doubt, maybe, or recognition that something about this didn't feel right. But she didn't speak up. Not yet. Maya took a slow breath. "My ID is in my wallet. May I reach for it?" She moved her hand toward her purse, slow and deliberate, telegraphing every movement. "Hands up." Ryan's voice exploded through the small security office, and Maya froze. Her hand was inches from her wallet, inches from the ID that would end this madness. But she couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. "My ID is in my wallet. You asked for identification." The tension in that room was suffocating. One wrong move, one misinterpreted gesture, and Maya knew. She knew. This could turn deadly. She'd seen the videos, she'd read the reports, she'd attended the funerals. She's done everything right, but when you're in this position, right doesn't always matter. Have you ever been in a situation where no matter what you did, it felt like you couldn't win? Drop your answer in the comments. Derek stepped forward, his voice urgent, insistent. "Officer, I want to press charges. She clearly stole merchandise. We have her on camera." Ryan looked at Derek, then back at Maya. The decision was made before Maya even had a chance to defend herself. "Ma'am, turn around. You're being detained. Detained." The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Maya's voice was barely a whisper. "Detained or arrested? Turn around." No answer, just a command. Maya felt her body move on autopilot, muscle memory from 20 years of watching others be processed, cuffed, taken into custody. She never imagined she'd be on this side of it. She turned around. She put her hands behind her back, and then she heard it. The click of metal handcuffs closing around her wrists. The sound echoed in her ears, drowning out everything else. Ryan's voice reading her Miranda rights became a distant hum. She had the right to remain silent. She had the right to an attorney. Anything she said could be used against her in a court of law. She'd read those same rights to hundreds of people. Now they were being read to her. They walked her out of the security office, through the store toward the entrance. A crowd had gathered, shoppers with their phones out, recording, whispering, pointing. Maya kept her head up, but inside, she was shattering into 1,000 pieces. Humiliation, rage, helplessness. All of it washing over her in waves she couldn't control. Her voice cracked as they reached the door. "Please. Check my wallet. My name is Maya Richardson." Lisa, walking behind them, picked up Maya's wallet from where it had been left on the security desk. She opened it, probably looking for a driver's license for confirmation of identity. And then her face changed. Lisa's eyes went wide. Her mouth opened slightly. She looked down at the wallet, then up at Maya, then back down again. "Ryan, we need to." Ryan cut her off, irritated, focused on getting Maya outside. "Not now." Lisa hesitated. She looked at Maya, really looked at her, and Maya saw something flicker in the younger officer's eyes. Recognition. Horror. The dawning realization that something was very, very wrong. But Lisa didn't speak up. She clutched the wallet tighter and followed Ryan and Maya out through the glass doors into the parking lot, into the bright afternoon sun that felt like a spotlight on Maya's shame. Marcus, the security guard, stood inside the store entrance, watching it all unfold. His jaw was clenched so tight it looked like his teeth might shatter. He saw himself in Maya. He saw his daughter. He saw every black person who'd ever been treated like a criminal for existing. And he hated himself for not speaking up, for not doing something, for being complicit in this injustice. Outside, the crowd was larger now. Phones were everywhere, capturing every moment. Ryan opened the back door of the patrol car, one hand on Maya's head as he guided her into the seat. The back of a police car, a place Maya had put countless suspects, countless criminals, countless people who actually deserved to be there. Now it was her turn. She sat in that back seat, handcuffed, unable to wipe the tears that were starting to blur her vision. She stared straight ahead, trying to hold on to whatever dignity she had left, trying to process the trauma of what was happening to her. Lisa stood outside the car, still holding Maya's wallet. She opened it again, her hands trembling slightly. Inside, beneath the driver's license, was a police ID card. Clear as day. Captain Maya Richardson. Badge number 4127. Oakland Police Department. Lisa's voice was quiet, urgent. Ryan, she's a cop. Ryan was filling out paperwork on the hood of the car, barely listening. What? Lisa walked over, holding out the wallet like it was evidence in a crime scene. She's a cop. Ryan, look. Ryan took the wallet, looked down at the ID card, and every drop of color drained from his face. His hand started to shake, his breath caught in his throat. Oh God. He looked at the patrol car, at Maya sitting in the back seat, handcuffed like a common criminal, and the full weight of what they'd just done hit him like a freight train. Ryan practically ran to the back door, yanking it open. His voice was panicked, apologetic, desperate. Captain Richardson? Maya turned her head slowly, meeting his eyes. Tears streamed down her face, but her voice was steady, strong, unbroken. Yes. Ryan fumbled with his words, his hands shaking as he reached for his handcuff keys. I didn't know. Maya cut him off, her voice like ice. Uncuff me, now. Ryan's hands were shaking so badly he could barely get the key in the lock. The handcuffs clicked open and Maya pulled her hands forward, rubbing her wrists where the metal had bitten into her skin. She stepped out of that patrol car, standing in the parking lot of Prestige department store, surrounded by strangers with cameras, two officers who just realized they'd made a career-ending mistake, and a store manager who was suddenly very, very quiet. But here's the question that should haunt all of us. They finally realized who she was. They finally understood that they'd handcuffed a police captain, a woman with 20 years of service, a woman who dedicated her life to the badge they wore on their chests. But would it have made a difference if she wasn't a cop? Would they have uncuffed her? Would they have apologized? Would they have cared at all? If Maya had been a teacher, a nurse, a cashier, a mother just trying to buy a blazer for a job interview, would she have gotten the same treatment? Or would she still be sitting in the back of that patrol car on her way to jail for a crime she didn't commit? That's the question. And the answer is what makes this story so devastating. Because Maya Richardson had a badge, and it still almost didn't save her. What about everyone else? What about the people who don't have that protection? What about the people who are arrested, charged, convicted, and forgotten, simply because they walked into a store while black? The handcuffs were off, but the damage was done. And what happened next would change not just Maya's life, but the lives of everyone involved in this catastrophic mistake. The handcuffs came off, but the humiliation remained. Maya Richardson stepped out of that patrol car, rubbing her wrists where the metal had left angry red marks on her dark skin. She stood in that parking lot, surrounded by a growing crowd of onlookers with their phones raised, capturing every second of what would become a moment that defined her career and exposed a truth that nobody wanted to acknowledge. Derek and Jennifer stood at the store entrance, confusion spreading across their faces. They didn't understand what was happening. Why were the officers suddenly so panicked? Why were they apologizing? Ryan and Lisa were falling over themselves with apologies, their voices overlapping in a desperate chorus of, "I'm so sorry," and "We didn't know." And this was a mistake. Maya held up one hand, and her voice cut through the chaos like a blade, cold, controlled, absolute. "Save it. I want your commanding officer here, now." Ryan's hand trembled as he reached for his radio. "Dispatch, we need a supervisor at Prestige department store. Code 3. Code 3. Urgent. Emergency. The kind of call that brought supervisors running." Maya turned slowly, her eyes locking onto Derek, who was still standing at the entrance, beginning to understand that whatever was happening, he was at the center of it. You, come here. It wasn't a request, it was a command. And Derek, for all his corporate authority and 15 years of playing security theater, suddenly looked very small. He approached, his steps hesitant, his face pale. Maya didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. You called the police because you assumed I was a criminal. Based on what evidence? Derek's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. No words came out. Within minutes, a police SUV pulled into the parking lot, lights flashing. Lieutenant James Crawford stepped out. 50 years old, 25 years on the force, white hair, weathered face, a man who'd seen everything. And he knew Maya. He'd known her for 15 years, watched her climb the ranks, respected her more than most of the brass in the department. He took one look at the scene. Maya standing with her arms crossed, Ryan and Lisa looking like they wanted to disappear into the pavement, the crowd with their phones, Derek sweating through his corporate shirt. And his face darkened. Captain Richardson? What the hell happened? Maya's voice was shaking, but not with fear, with controlled fury, with the weight of 20 years of swallowing injustice, of being professional, of playing by rules that were never designed to protect people who looked like her. She explained. Every detail. From the moment she walked into the store to the moment the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. Her voice never wavered, but you could hear the cracks forming underneath. The barely contained rage threatening to break through. Crawford turned to Ryan and Lisa, his voice thunderous. You arrested a captain? Ryan looked like he might be sick. Sir, we didn't know. But Maya interrupted, her voice cutting through the excuse. They were following orders, Lieutenant. The problem is bigger. The crowd had grown now. Dozens of people, phones raised, recording every word. This wasn't just about two officers making a mistake. This was about a system. About assumptions, about the way certain people were treated the moment they walked through a door. Maya turned back to Derek, and her words were measured, deliberate, devastating. How many other people have you done this to? How many people who didn't have a badge to protect them? Derek was stammering now, falling back on the same empty phrases that had protected him for years. We have policies, loss prevention protocols. We were just following. Show me the footage, all of it. It wasn't a request. They walked back into the store, the entire group, Maya, Crawford, Ryan, Lisa, Derek, and Marcus, the security guard, who had been standing silently, watching his own complicity play out in real time. Back in that small security office surrounded by monitors, Maya pointed to the screen. Rewind to 2:47 p.m. Derek's hands were shaking as he worked the controls. The footage rolled back, and there it was, clear as day. Maya walking through the clearance section, holding the leather gloves, examining them, then placing them carefully on the rack. Not hiding them. Not concealing them. Returning them because they didn't fit. Aisle 7 full camera view, undeniable. Derek was sweating now, his shirt collar dark with moisture. I didn't see that angle. Maya's voice was soft, but it carried the weight of 1,000 injustices. You didn't look. You saw what you expected to see. She turned to Jennifer, who'd been standing in the corner, trying to make herself invisible. You followed me from the moment I entered. Why? Jennifer said nothing. She just stared at the floor. Say it. Maya's voice was gentle now, almost compassionate, but there was steel underneath. Jennifer's voice was barely a whisper, tears forming in her eyes. I thought. You thought I didn't belong here. The words hung in the air. Jennifer's tears spilled over, but she didn't deny it. She couldn't. Maya's pain was visible now. 20 years of being a cop, of trying to change the system from within, of swallowing her pride and her rage and her grief, all of it written on her face. But her authority was absolute. She stood in that room, surrounded by people who had humiliated her, and she was still the most powerful person there. Crawford broke the silence. Captain, what do you want to do? Maya took a breath, then another. She was calculating, weighing options, considering consequences, not just for herself but for everyone involved. I formally declined to press charges against Officers Mitchell and Tran. Ryan and Lisa looked up, shock on their faces. Maya turned to Crawford. This goes in their file as a learning moment, not a termination offense. They responded to a call. They need better training, but they don't need to lose their careers. Then she turned to Derek, and her voice went cold again. You, however, will be hearing from the city's civil rights attorney. and I'll be speaking with your corporate headquarters." Derek's face went white. "Captain, please. Save it." Marcus, the security guard, stepped forward then. His voice was rough with emotion. "Captain, I'm sorry I didn't speak up. I see this happen all the time here, and I needed this job." Maya's expression softened, just slightly. "I understand, but silence is complicity." Marcus nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I'm putting in my notice today." They walked back outside into the afternoon sun that was starting to dip toward evening. The crowd was still there, but quieter now, sensing that whatever had happened inside that store, something had shifted. Lisa approached Maya, her voice small. "Captain, I saw your ID right away. I should have said something louder." Maya looked at the young officer, seeing herself 20 years ago. Idealistic, wanting to do good, not yet understanding how broken the system was. "Yes, you should have. But you're young. Learn from this. Every person you encounter could be someone's mother, daughter, sister. They all deserve dignity." Ryan approached next, his face red, his voice thick. "Captain, I'm sorry isn't enough." "No, it's not, but it's a start. Write a report, a real one, about what happened and why." Maya walked to her car, the one she'd parked hours ago, when this was supposed to be a simple shopping trip on her day off. She didn't have her blazer, she didn't have her scarf. She had her dignity, barely intact, and a story that would change everything. What would you have done in Maya's position? Would you have pressed charges? Would you have let it go? Drop your thoughts in the comments because this conversation matters. Maya Richardson went home that day without her new blazer. But she went home with something more important, proof that even a badge can't always protect you from the color of your skin. 3 weeks later, she stood before that police reform panel she'd been preparing for. The one she'd wanted to look sharp for, professional for, powerful for. And she told this story. Every painful, humiliating detail. She told it to a room full of policymakers and community leaders and journalists. She told it because silence was complicity, and she'd been silent long enough. Derek Clemens was fired. Prestige department store implemented mandatory anti-bias training for every employee, from the stockroom to the corporate office. They also revised their loss prevention policies and installed cameras in every blind spot. Officers Ryan Mitchell and Lisa Tran didn't lose their jobs, but they became something more valuable. They became vocal advocates for police reform. They spoke at community meetings. They pushed for better training. They admitted their mistakes and worked to make sure other officers didn't repeat them. And Marcus? He kept his word. He quit his security job and started working with a nonprofit that advocated for criminal justice reform. He found his voice. Finally, after years of staying silent. Change doesn't happen in a moment. It happens when enough people decide that enough is enough. It happens when someone like Maya Richardson refuses to be invisible, refuses to accept that this is just how things are, refuses to let her humiliation be for nothing. Maya Richardson is still a captain. She's still showing up every day, putting on that uniform, carrying that badge. She's still fighting to change the system from within, even though she knows now, more intimately than ever, just how broken that system is. She's still walking into rooms where she doesn't feel welcome. She's still proving herself over and over again. She's still dealing with the trauma of being handcuffed in a parking lot while strangers filmed her humiliation. But she's still here. Still fighting. Still refusing to be invisible. If this story moved you, if it made you angry, if it made you think, then like the video. Hit that subscribe button and make sure you don't miss stories like this because they need to be told. They need to be heard. Because stories like this happen every single day. To people without badges. To people without cameras recording. To people whose names we'll never know because they didn't have the platform or the power to make anyone listen. This happened to a police captain. Imagine what happens to everyone else. What will you do to make sure stories like this stop? Not just shared, not just discussed, but actually stopped. Because awareness is only the first step. The question is, what comes next?